A young black teen steps into first class, unassuming, polite, and solo. His presence drawing no immediate attention as he moves with quiet grace through the bustling terminal, where the hum of announcements and rolling suitcases creates a symphony of travel chaos. Yet he navigates it all with the calm of someone who has learned to blend in, to become part of the background rather than the focal point, knowing that in such spaces, standing out can invite unnecessary scrutiny, and so he keeps his cap low over his eyes, his hoodie pulled up just enough to shield his features from casual glances, carrying only a simple duffel bag that holds the essentials for his journey, no flashy accessories or entourage to signal his true status. For to the world around him, he appears as just another traveler, perhaps one who got lucky with an upgrade or a last-minute seat, his lanky frame and sharp, observant eyes giving away nothing of the world he comes from, a world built on innovation and influence. But he prefers it that way, embracing the subtlety of being underestimated. Because in those moments of dismissal, people often reveal their authentic selves, their hidden biases and unspoken judgments. And it is in that revelation that true understanding emerges. As he approaches the boarding bridge without a word, the gate agents barely glancing at his pass before waving him through, the jetway stretching out like a tunnel into another realm, where the air grows cooler and the sounds of the airport fade into a distant echo, and inside the aircraft, the cabin welcomes him with the familiar scent of fresh linen mixed with the faint trace of coffee from previous flights. A mid-30 seconds attendant positioned at the entrance, offering mechanical smiles to each arriving passenger, her routine polished from years of service. But when her gaze lands on him, something subtle shifts in her expression, a brief pause in her welcoming demeanor, her badge reading Karen. And in that instant, a flicker of doubt crosses her face as she takes in the sight of a teen in casual wear, traveling alone in a section reserved for those who exude a certain level of visible affluence. Yet he offers a polite nod and proceeds to his seat, to be by the window, where he can gaze out at the tarmac and the world beyond, stowing his bag overhead with careful movement so as not to disturb the other passengers already settling in. The executive beside him absorbed in his tablet, the woman across the aisle scrolling through her emails with focused intensity, and he pulls out his earbuds, ready to lose himself in some music, or perhaps a podcast. But before he can fully relax, he senses the approach, the hesitation in the air, the sound of footsteps turning back toward him. And then her voice cuts through the quiet hum of the cabin. "Hold on," she says, with an edge of authority that demands compliance. "Boarding pass, please." And he looks up, composed yet alert, handing over the display on his app without hesitation, watching as she skims it briefly, her eyes darting back and forth between the screen and his face, as if trying to reconcile the information with what she sees before her. "This says, first class," she states bluntly, her tone laced with skepticism, and he affirms it steadily. "Correct." But she presses on, folding her arms in a gesture that closes off any easy resolution, inquiring if he is flying by himself, which he confirms, and then sharpening her questions to ask about who purchased the ticket, a query that feels intrusive, unnecessary. And he pauses, still seated firmly, wondering aloud if it is relevant, but the silence that follows stretches uncomfortably, drawing subtle lifts of heads from nearby passengers who sense the off-kilter vibe in the air. And she advances closer, breaching the invisible boundaries of personal space that travelers expect in such confined environments, declaring that she needs to confirm with higher-ups because something seems off, irregular in her view, and he remains unmoved, inviting her to do so. But instead of stepping away to verify, she lingers there, hovering as if protecting the sanctity of the seat itself from his presence. And then, in a move that catches everyone off guard, she lunges forward, yanking the device from his hand and in the process clipping his fingers sharply, the sound echoing like a sudden crack through the cabin, eliciting gasps from a few scattered seats, the gentleman in 2 amperes peering over his glasses with mild surprise, the neighbor clutching her purse and gawking but remaining silent, and he pulls back, more stunned than hurt, murmuring that it was uncalled for, but she barks an order to follow her, and he rises deliberately, gathering his bag, and endures the long, shaming walk down the aisle amid murmurs and dodged looks from those around him. No one stepping in to halt the progression, No interventions offered, perhaps because they deem it a routine check, or justify it in their minds as a simple misunderstanding, and he holds back any emotional outburst, keeping his volume low and his composure intact as he claims a cramped spot in row 38, wedged between strangers with the whine of the jets providing the only semblance of solace. And once settled, he digs out his phone, which she had fortunately missed in her haste, and taps out a brief message. She hit my hand, shoved to back, and sends it off into the digital ether, where it lands in a sleek San Francisco penthouse, brewing a tempest in the mind of the recipient, who reads it promptly and pauses only for a moment before dialing a single number that sets everything in motion, causing the jet to halt just before it begins to roll. The departure stalled as systems flag with urgent alerts, and in the cockpit, the captain receives a rare directive that baffles him, exchanging a puzzled look with the first officer about this override from high up. Something serious indeed. And back in the tail section, the young man shuts his eyes, letting the droning engines fade into white noise, harboring no grin or rage but simply patience, trusting in the moves being made on his behalf. While forward in the service area, Karen loiters with a growing puzzlement at the unexpected standstill, a junior crew member approaching to inform her of the hold order, and she furrows her brow, questioning why, under clear skies, only to receive a shrug and the mention of exec-level involvement, and for the first time that day, a twinge of unease hits her, a twist in her gut and a clamp in her chest, as the epiphany begins to dawn that this was not a mere seat swap, but something far more consequential, that she had wronged someone untouchable, all while the takeoff light remains stubbornly on, and the hush in the economy section thickens, dwarfed by the inner whirl of emotions swirling within him, the engine purr fading to an emotional haze that mirrors the gap from his rightful spot to this demotion, his dignity snatched without any ally raising a voice in protest, for he has always shunned spotlights and craved no nods of approval, raised to command through subtle presence rather than overt displays. Yet this situation transcends personal pride, looping in his mind as a replay of the grab, the glare, the order to move, with the lingering sting not of physical discomfort, but of the incredulity in her assured timbre, the presumption evident in her stare, the firm belief that he simply did not match the environment, decreeing his place without a single query, and now with the craft idle, teetering on the brink of fallout, he ticks off the seconds as judgment begins to form in the systems beyond the plane, while the pilot receives a follow-up message directly from Victor Kane, granting full sway and demanding immediate obedience, and the skipper, a veteran flyer, senses the weight of it all beyond mere gravity, turning to his co-pilot to note that the kid from 2B who was relocated is the cause of this hold. And in the cabin, murmurs simmer under the veneer of calm as passengers exchange whispers, a pearl-necked dame leaning to her spouse to mention hearing about the strike that became the source of the flight snag, and he shakes his head in outrage. While in the service nook, Karen's poise starts to fracture, her grip tightening until her joints pale, reflecting on how she acted on a hunch built from decades of subtle hints and unspoken verdicts, glances she never challenged, never overt or bold but perilous in their cloak, as policy dubbed savvy. And now, her instinct screams of an irreparable shift, something no quick courtesy can fix. And regrettably, she had even skipped asking his name, and in seat 38C, his device hums with a message from his dad. Aware now, stay put, hush, immobile till prompted, which he absorbs twice, knowing his father's words are sparse but laser-sharp, that influence thrives in restraint, compelling attention without the need for bellows. And in seat 4D, a lady drums her fingers nervously, having witnessed the relocation, and noted Karen's selective stance and checks, remaining voiceless then, but now feeling the muteness scorch within. And when she glances aft, the boy stares ahead, accustomed to worlds that lag behind his pace. And suddenly, the intercom chimes with a calm tone that feels too even, summoning Karen Ellis to the flight deck, causing her to startle, her colleague asking if she is all right, to which she nods hastily before advancing, dread scaling her vertebrae like an unwelcome climber. And en route, the man in 2 amperes folds his paper and tracks her progress with a knowing look, the door parting before her knock, the captain stoic as he instructs her to shut it, and once latched, he delivers the news that Kane's team has reached them, identifying the youth Marcus as his kin, leaving her gaping and speechless, accusing her of skipping protocol, making assumptions, and making contact, resulting in the delay, and she stammers a defense about intent. But the captain cuts in sharply that intent is irrelevant while action counts, and Kane demands a cabin-wide apology or an immediate off-board escort, her breath hitching at the thought of facing everyone, and he affirms it must be before all. And back in his seat, Marcus stays rooted as another buzz arrives from his dad. She's en route, observe but mute, which he pockets after a sigh. Hearing the footfalls resonate as Karen retraces her path, head swiveling in response, the air charged like a pre-storm gust, her pace labored and facade splintered as she reaches the tail and halts, forcing herself to meet his gaze, addressing him as Mr. Kane in a softer tone than before, expressing sorry for misjudging and mishandling, hoping he accepts, and he remains steady and unyielding, pausing before responding that it is accepted, but she predefined belonging in that space, and she gulps as he adds to reflect on others without leverage who endure in quiet, his phrases even, and burdening her frame like added weight, and she dips her head, pivoting away, diminished under the scrutiny of those who were once silent, passing the front rows where eyes avert or some show approval with a subtle affirm. And finally, Marcus leans to the pain, recognizing that this is not about vendetta but revelation, and revelation when deserved needs no fanfare, just a halt to pretense, allowing the world to adjust its view in the process. All while the cabin settles into a new kind of awareness, the young man finding a measure of peace in the knowledge that sometimes standing firm in one's truth can shift the narrative without a single raised voice. And as the moments stretch, he contemplates the broader implications of such encounters, how they ripple out beyond the individual to touch on larger societal threads of equity and respect that weave through everyday interactions, reminding him of past experiences where similar judgments had been cast, but without the means to address them so directly. And yet here, in this confined space high above the ground waiting to take off, a small act of reaching out via message has set in motion a chain that challenges the status quo, forcing those involved to confront their roles in perpetuating or dismantling unfair systems, and he breathes deeply, centering himself amid the ongoing delay, knowing that patience is his greatest ally in this unfolding story, one that began with a simple boarding but has evolved into a lesson for all aboard, and perhaps beyond, as whispers continue to circulate, passengers sharing sidelong glances and quiet conversations about what they witnessed, some expressing disbelief at the handling, others reflecting on times they might have stayed silent in similar situations, the atmosphere thick with unspoken thoughts, and Karen, now back in her position, feels the weight of her actions settling in, a realization that her quick judgments have led to this point, prompting an internal dialogue about growth and change, while the captain coordinates with ground control, ensuring compliance with the override, the entire flight crew aware that this is no ordinary hold but one driven by influence from the highest levels, and Marcus, still in his relocated seat, finds solace in the view outside the window, the airport activity continuing oblivious to the drama within, planes taxiing and taking off as if nothing has happened. But for him, everything has shifted, a subtle empowerment in knowing that his voice, though quiet, has been heard through the actions of his father, who operates from a place of deliberate power, built over years of building empires in the tech world, empires that touch lives in ways most never see. And as the minutes tick by, he allows himself a moment of reflection on his upbringing, one that emphasized resilience and strategic thinking over emotional reactions, lessons from his dad that have served him well in navigating a world that often views him through a lens of preconceptions. And he wonders about the attendant, what experiences shaped her to act so decisively without verification, perhaps a accumulation of past incidents or ingrained habits from the job. But he pushes aside any bitterness, focusing instead on the potential for this event to spark positive change, not just for himself, but for others who might face similar treatment without the resources to push back. And the cabin lights dim slightly as preparations for departure are paused, creating an intimate space for contemplation among the passengers. Some pulling out books or devices to pass the time, others engaging in low conversations that touch on topics of fairness and courtesy in travel, the incident serving as a catalyst for broader discussions. And in the midst of it all, Marcus remains a pillar of calm, his presence a quiet reminder that dignity can withstand even the most unexpected challenges. And as the hold continues, he receives another message, a simple encouragement from his father to keep his head high, reinforcing the bond they share, one built on mutual respect and understanding, and he replies briefly, expressing a desire for awareness rather than fear, hoping that the outcome fosters empathy rather than resentment. And the junior crew member, Mia, moves through the aisles with a tray of refreshments, her steps steady despite the underlying tension, pausing briefly by his seat to offer a drink with a soft word of acknowledgement, a small gesture that speaks volumes in the charged environment, and he nods in thanks, appreciating the humanity in her approach, contrasting with the earlier interaction. And as the plane sits motionless on the tarmac, the young man contemplates the irony of it all.
How a routine flight has turned into a stage for real-life drama, highlighting issues that simmer beneath the surface of polite society, issues of assumption and belonging that affect so many, and he resolves to carry this experience forward, not as a burden but as a story to share when the time is right, perhaps inspiring others to speak up or reflect on their own behaviors. And the whispers grow a bit louder as more passengers connect the dots, realizing the hold is linked to the earlier relocation, some expressing support in hushed tones, others pondering the power dynamics at play, and Karen, sensing the shift in the cabin's energy, feels a deepening sense of regret, her earlier certainty crumbling under the weight of consequences, prompting a personal reckoning that might lead to growth if she allows it. And the captain, receiving updates from corporate, prepares to address the situation further, ensuring that protocols are followed to resolve the matter fairly. And throughout it all, Marcus maintains his composure, a testament to his character and the values instilled in him, values that prioritize understanding over conflict. And as the story unfolds in real time, the cabin becomes a microcosm of larger societal themes, where individual actions can spark collective awareness, leading to moments of connection and change that extend far beyond the confines of the aircraft, reminding everyone aboard that travel is not just about destinations but about the human interactions along the way. And in that realization, there lies the potential for a more inclusive world, one where assumptions are challenged and dignity is upheld for all, regardless of appearance or background. And as the delay stretches on, the young man finds a strange peace in the waiting, knowing that sometimes the most powerful statements are made not with words but with patient presence, allowing the truth to emerge on its own terms. And the airport outside continues its rhythm, oblivious. But inside, lives are subtly altered, perspectives broadened, and the journey, though grounded, moves forward in unexpected ways, fostering a sense of shared humanity among strangers brought together by circumstance. And Marcus, at the center of it, embodies the quiet strength that can inspire such transformations, his story a beacon for those who seek to navigate the world with grace and resolve. High up where vistas deceive with serenity but realities cut deep, Flight 512 lingers in an uneasy calm as beverages circulate among the passengers, buckles clicking into place while the motors mesh seamlessly with the soft flips of pages and the subtle glows from screens illuminating faces in the dim cabin light. Yet beneath this surface, tranquility lies the undeniable toll of altitude, where the air feels rarefied and responsibility seems to race past even the speed of sound. And Marcus in seat 38C sits with his silhouette cast in a faint beam from the overhead, remaining static since the moment of amends, uttering sparse words because his quiet isn't born from evasion but from a deep-rooted anchor that disquiets those who had eyed the earlier clash, yet chose to stay hushed. For there is something profoundly dismaying about witnessing a discounted soul suddenly dominate the space through mere poise, turning Marcus into a mirror that reflects unavoidable truths back at them. And rose up ahead, the once wary gentleman now peeks backward with a mix of remorse or newfound insight, having offered no rally for or against during the incident, no personal regrets voiced aloud, merely acting as a spectator whose role has unexpectedly turned active in the aftermath. And in the service nook, Karen backs herself against the counter with palms locked tightly together, a subtle tremor exposing the strained mask she struggles to maintain. The waiver she inked earlier for interim benching feeling denser than the parchment it was written on, while her colleague Mia stands watchful nearby, hovering without offering judgment or balm to soothe the tension, gently inquiring if she is holding up, to which Karen delays her response before admitting that after routing this path for 15 years, she has never felt so diminished in her role, and Mia chooses silence in reply, understanding that some matters extend beyond what verbiage can repair now. And up on the deck, the skipper fields a wire from headquarters announcing that a probe has been launched with testimonies to be gathered post-touchdown, the top brass having ordered a comprehensive audit of protocols and an overhaul of conduct standards, labeling it as a pivotal point in their operations. And indeed, aloft in the skies, verity begins to plummet with an undeniable pull, something the travelers can sense in the atmosphere, the onus of observation weighing heavily, the unease stemming from their earlier quietude now booming louder than any thrust from the engines. Though Marcus seeks no orations or declarations from them, having long ceased anticipating such gestures, but tides are turning nonetheless as gazes that once probed him with suspicion now dawdle uncertainly, hesitant to lock eyes fully, wary of the reflections they might encounter within his steady demeanor, and he inhales deeply while eyeing the mist forming on his soda glass, that simple pour from Mia earlier serving as more than just a quench but as a mending token, a tiny effort to tilt the skewed scales back toward balance, and adjacent to him, a vested professional leans over with a low voice, admitting that he missed the chance to speak up earlier and owes a sorry for his inaction, to which Marcus responds evenly by asking why he held back, prompting an exhale from the man who figures it was futile. No alibi, but a plain fact that he aimed to avoid escalation, yet Marcus notes calmly that it was already escalated, emphasizing how quietude merely muffles harm rather than shielding anyone from it. And the professional reclines slowly, digesting the insight without retort, engaging in a mere personal audit of his choices, and farther aft, a duo of passengers shares a feed on their device, viewing a clip captured covertly from the mid-cabin area that documents Karen's advance with her demeanor and carriage fully evident, the strike itself off-frame, but the debasement clear and unmistakable in the footage, with views already hitting 15,000 swiftly and continuing to surge as shares spread across networks. And concurrently, Victor is on a conference with carrier executives, choosing not to threaten formal actions just yet, shunning the spotlight or demands for dismissals, instead seeking genuine evolution by pointing out that this isn't about a lone staffer but a wider pattern that requires mending through unteaching what had been disguised as professional facades, not through superficial spin or quick fixes. And aboard the craft, Marcus stirs for the first time after nearly an hour, opening his phone not for mindless browsing but to check his dad's latest update stating that ears are open and to keep his chin high, to which he replies succinctly that the goal should be awareness rather than fear. And at that same beat, Mia traverses the aisles with her cart, her pace firm despite an unsteady pulse within, halting briefly by Marcus to whisper that people are starting to grasp it, and he affirms that some do while others might not, trailing off because it is needless to complete the thought, as insight creeps in unevenly across individuals. But once initiated, it propagates in a soft yet potent manner, much like pressurization easing gradually until the shift in breath becomes undeniable to all. And as the aircraft soars over wisps of clouds, another kind of ascent brews in the form of repercussion, extending not solely to Karen but to each person perched in the premium seats who beheld the youth's honor being raised, only to grasp tardily that they had flanked the ledge of error in their passivity, and such ledges, akin to great heights, have a way of unveiling true selves in the sparse atmosphere where excuses thin out, and eventually the gear kisses the pavement with a gentle bump that signals the end of the airborne phase. But for Marcus Kane, it feels less like an endpoint and more like an unveil of deeper layers. As the craft decelerates along the runway, he eyes the urban sprawl beyond, known yet somehow aloof in its vastness, the undercarriage performing its duty flawlessly, yet the cabin air lingers lean, as if breaths are taken in awareness of imminent stares and tied tongues among the group, transforming Flight 512 from mere transit into an indelible mark on their memories, sans any bumps or lost connections, achieved instead via a layer stripped from the illusion of ease to bear a raw unease lurking below. And Marcus, in 38 sea eyes, the terminal gleams as they smear across the window pane, his mind skipping over potential fallout or tolls to ponder instead the heft of quietude over direct clash, how even after resolutions, Unseen aches persist in places where no visible mark shows, and the skipper's voice breaks through the hush to welcome folks to the hub, instructing them to stay belted until preparations are complete, mentioning a slight wait before deplaning and thanking them for their patience. But the cabin brims not with forbearance but with a palpable tension, a cognizance that clings like fog after a wrong has unfolded, making forward steps feel like navigating around remnant guilt scattered across the floor. And in the nook, Karen stands rigid with limbs crossed and gaze fixed on the exit ahead, her attire suddenly constricting like never before, her tag burdensome against her chest, having uttered her amends and walked the path, but none of it undoing the prelude that set everything in motion. And Mia nears with a fold from the captain containing HQ's final directive to hold until management fetches her, and to yield her ID prior to exit, which Karen scans twice as if denial could stave off the truth staring back, remaining mute as she unpins the item and hands it over with a soft clink that resonates deeply within her, attempting to begin with. Didn't intend only for Mia's glance to sever the sentence. Not in a harsh or final manner, but with a done expression that conveys intent is secondary when the key was to halt before the act ever occurred, and Karen averts her eyes to a blurred point, moving beyond rules now to recall Marcus's poise at the moment of contact, how her own sense of scale shrank upon the ID reveal, seeing him not as mere hooded youth but as someone empowered, yet the deeper insight hits that even sans status, it would still have been an error, and that realization becomes the prime haunt lingering in her thoughts, while through the aisles, the crew paces warily, as if uncertain how to close a journey that shifted midway, with flyers shuffling in their seats, checking devices for updates, casting glances aft to where Marcus remains surface serene but with depths carved by the experience. And in row 35, a pair discusses whether the firm will issue a statement, with one hoping so while the other murmurs that his actions have already echoed louder than any formal words could, and Marcus ignores the surrounding buzz, feeling it all yet unswayed by it, awaiting not sorries or nods but a form of comprehension that might remain elusive for some, and finally the hatch hisses open to allow an overseer to enter, accompanied by a suited duo trailing with a clipboard poised and faces blank, skipping the front ritual to pause instead with an aft nod and hold their position, the lead voicing for the cane passenger to deplane final per top instructions, prompting Marcus to rise measuredly, affirm with a nod, and shoulder his pack before traversing the aisle, where space is yielded not just with limbs but with regards that acknowledge his role, seen anew, not as the rear dweller but as a catalyst, stirring uneasy but necessary reflections. And one by one, as he passes, pivots occur with mouths parted in vague attempts at expression, a whisper of appreciation here, a light chest tap there, a small nod elsewhere, offering not props or sympathy but pure recognition, which had been his sole want from the start. And at the fore, a rep advances with a hushed tone to express profound regret on behalf of the organization, noting that the chief seeks a chat if amenable and pledging commitment to improvement moving forward, to which Marcus halts his reply briefly before suggesting to skip the confab as a starting point and begin instead with the hires, training them to see folks as individuals rather than potential threats, leaving the rep to affirm slowly in mute agreement as words fail in the moment, and as Marcus exits the craft, the dawn rays greet him like a verdict on the events, the globe remaining static from the time midair, but with an inner shift brewing within him, and perhaps within the watchers too, who now carry the experience as a subtle alteration to their views, broadening perspectives in ways that might influence future interactions, fostering a ripple of empathy that extends beyond this single flight to touch on everyday encounters where similar dynamics play out unnoticed. And Karen, left perched solo on the aft seat in wait mode, finds the void cabin offering no balm but mere rebound of her thoughts, the ground beneath feeling unsteady for the first time as it demands a reckoning she cannot escape. Not a simple snag or slip, but a deliberate selection whose trails etch eternally into her consciousness, prompting a path toward personal evolution if she chooses to walk it, and Marcus threads through the concourse in his routine manner, yet the pavement resonates with a novel quality, not harsher but more tangible, urging a presence in the now that he embraces fully, with throngs swirling around oblivious to the jet saga that unfolded, yet an unseen strand trails of peaks and hushes, a quiet that outvoices any speakers in its impact, and gateside, a polished SUV idles with a duo in crisp garb standing by, their demeanors polite via mandate rather than innate warmth, one advancing to introduce as Evan Reed, the carrier link, his voice balanced and respectful while masking a firm unease beneath, extending a formal regret and opening the door for lead dialogue if desired, to which Marcus lingers with strap gripped firmly, stating calmly that talk is secondary now while shift remains primary, leading to traded glances and an affirmation from them, acknowledging that verbiage comes simple but the sequel will prove tougher to navigate, and he enters the ride where the hide feels chill against his frame yet does little to abate the unrest stirring within, mulling over the hand, Stryker's actions, the observer's roles, and the clip-seers who might feel ire or remorse or engage in musing upon viewing, but he also ponders Mia's contribution, her initial mute stance giving way to an unscripted and raw interaction that carried more weight than a courteous chorus ever could, and as the vehicle pulls from the curb, his device hums with Dad's message about mounting buzz and steering the tail appropriately, affirming that he handled it right, and Marcus gazes at the blur of the city passing by, delaying his reply to absorb the myriad unknowns who have now inherited a yarn extending beyond the flight and gate into something vast and influential, recognizing that not all instants spark uprisings, but often a mere denial to fade or be dismissed or muted can ignite meaningful change. And in the days following at HQ, the carrier issues a decree free of fluff, mandating anti-prejudice drills and entry revamps alongside an open sorry addressed to Marcus plus all who have felt diminished in priors, acknowledging it as an incomplete mend that cannot fully restore but sparks a beginning nonetheless. And Marcus shuns the lenses and skips formal chats, convening instead with teen hubs nationwide to share his ordeal without tagging his lineage, coaching on maintaining poise without roar and letting dignity bear the loads that ire sometimes cannot sustain, marking the voyage's end while the ripple only dawns brighter. For what landed that day was not merely a craft but a verity that, once spied, slumbers no more, and Marcus Kane aimed for no grand declare when he boarded routine in hushed deference, simply point to point without foreseeing the bias or the contact or the pivot to a lecture for the cabin, and soon the land at large, viewing the C2B affair as no mix-up or ID flub but a deeper rot that mirrors daily experiences for multitudes with scarce stages to defy them openly. Where he was weighed not for deeds or words but for visage alone, daring a niche deemed unfit by some standards. Yet unlike those who isolate in such moments, Marcus held an extra layer of not mere means or access, but a lucid voice backed by his dad's skill in flipping might into answerability. And in that instant of refusal to flare up, sending a lone ping instead, he flipped the entire script, turning the intended shame into a boost for highlighting the wrong, because this round it was watched closely, ensuring quiet did not prevail as the delay spawned, and the yarn unwound with verity racing ahead of any bumps, leading silent sitters to mull over their choices, rule-following crew to query the frame of their operations, and the carrier that had brushed off countless lesser indignities now compelled to heed, because the ignored voice came backed by an unignorable force. But the yarn's core might resides not in Marcus's coin or lineage, but in his grip on honor amid attempts to strip it, reclaiming his spot not through spite but with purposeful intent, reminding witnesses that equity needs no amp to resonate, merely a firm foothold to stand upon. And from the chill peak at the start to the end, it evolved from a private beat into a communal audit that poses enduring queries like how frequent we witness wrongs yet remain tongue-tied or excuse our hush in hopes another pipes up, with the lesson transcending hue to focus on sight and recall that attendance counts while honor should always precede any bias. Duty bound to spot when someone is shoved aft in real or fig terms, to voice out and redirect the arc toward fairness. And applying this in life begins tiny with peering deep, skipping, presume, and engaging when unfairness is spied without needing might for a dent but just guts to view clearly, letting Marcus's arc serve as a cue that hush is shatterable. The softest defy can thunder across spaces, and honor screams not for regard but endures steadfastly. And if this arc stirred thoughts or pondered moments or halted you even briefly, consider backing the channel by subbing, ringing the bell, and dropping a comment on your spot, as likes and shares fuel such arcs to stay alive, counting as they ignite and cue what humanity truly means. Grateful for your presence here. Stay alert and compassionate, and recall that flights can alter far beyond mere stops in ways that enrich us all. Karen perched solo on the aft perch in wait mode, as the last echoes of footsteps faded from the now empty cabin, the quiet no longer a bomb but a mere rebound of her swirling thoughts that amplified every creak of the aircraft settling on the tarmac, the ground beneath her feet feeling unsteady for the first time in her long career, demanding a reckoning she could no longer escape or dismiss as a fleeting error, not merely a snag in the schedule or a minor slip in judgment, but a deliberate selection of actions whose trails etched eternally into her memory, prompting her to trace back through years of similar moments she had brushed aside as instinctual, now seeing them as patterns woven into the fabric of her daily routines, and as management approached with measured steps, their voices low and professional, she handed over her final reports with hands that trembled just slightly, accepting the escort to a quiet office where discussions of retraining and sensitivity workshops awaited, not as punishment but as an opportunity for genuine reflection that might reshape her interactions moving forward. While Marcus threaded through the concourse in his familiar routine, yet the pavement under his shoes resonated with a novel quality that wasn't harsher or colder but more tangible and insistent, urging a heightened presence in the now that he embraced as he moved past oblivious crowds rushing to their gates. Each person absorbed in their own travel tales, unaware of the profound saga that had just unfolded in the skies above. Yet an unseen strand of influence trailed behind him, composed of lingering peaks from fellow deplaners and hushes that carried the weight of shared realization, a quiet that outvoiced any amplified speakers in its subtle power to inspire change. And at the gate-side curb, a polished SUV idled patiently, with a duo in crisp professional garb standing sentinel, their demeanors infused with a politeness driven by protocol rather than spontaneous warmth, one stepping forward to introduce himself as Evan Reed, the carrier's senior link for such matters, his voice balanced and laced with respectful undertones that masked a underlying firm unease about the situation's ramifications, extending a formal expression of regret on behalf of the entire organization and opening the door wide for any further dialogue with leadership that Marcus might be willing to entertain, to which he lingered thoughtfully with his bag strap gripped firmly in hand, responding calmly that while talk held some value, it remained secondary in the grand scheme, with true shift and transformation being the primary goal worth pursuing, leading to exchanged glances among the reps followed by a solemn affirmation, acknowledging openly that while verbiage flowed simply and effortlessly, the sequel of actual implementation would prove far tougher and more demanding to navigate successfully. And as he entered the vehicle, the smooth hide of the seats felt chill against his frame, yet did little to abate the inner unrest that continued to stir like a gentle current, prompting him to mull over not just the hand, Stryker's immediate regret, but the broader web of observers who had played passive roles, the clip-seers scattered across digital spaces who might experience waves of ire or deep remorse, or engage in thoughtful musing upon encountering the footage. But he also pondered Mia's quiet yet impactful contribution, her initial mute observance giving way to an unscripted and authentically raw interaction that carried far more weight and resonance than a rehearsed chorus of courteous phrases ever could in bridging divides. And as the car pulled smoothly from the curb into the flow of airport traffic, his device hummed softly with another message from his dad, noting the mounting buzz from various quarters and their plan to steer the tale in a constructive direction, affirming that Marcus had handled the entire ordeal with the poise that was needed, and he gazed out at the city blurring past the tinted windows, delaying his reply to fully absorb the myriad unknowns who had now inherited this expanding yarn that stretched well beyond the confines of the flight and the gate into something vast and potentially transformative for many, recognizing deeply that not every instant demands the spark of full uprisings or dramatic overhauls, but often a mere denial to fade into invisibility or be casually dismissed or silenced can ignite the most meaningful and lasting forms of change in subtle yet profound ways. And in the days that followed at the carrier's headquarters, they issued a public decree stripped of any unnecessary fluff or vague assurances, outlining clear mandates for comprehensive anti-prejudice drills across all staff levels, complete revamps of entry and verification protocols to ensure equity, and an open heartfelt sorry directed not only to Marcus but also to all who had ever felt diminished or overlooked in similar priors, openly admitting that while this represented an incomplete mend incapable of fully restoring what was lost, it undeniably sparked a beginning toward better practices and cultures within the industry, and Marcus consciously shunned the glaring lenses of media spotlights and skipped any formal chats or interviews that came his way, choosing instead to convene quietly with teen hubs and community organizations nationwide, sharing the essence of his ordeal without attaching his prominent lineage or family tag to it, coaching participants on the art of maintaining poise without resorting to roar or outburst, and on letting inherent dignity bear the emotional loads that fleeting ire sometimes cannot sustain over the long haul, effectively marking the voyage's official end while allowing its ripple to dawn ever brighter across wider circles, for what truly landed that day extended far beyond a mere craft. Touching down, it was an enduring verity that, once spied and acknowledged, slumbers no more but awakens ongoing dialogues and actions, and reflecting on it all, Marcus Kane had aimed for no grand or ostentatious declare when he initially boarded in his routine manner of hushed deference, simply intending to travel point to point without any foreseeing of the underlying bias that would surface, or the unexpected contact that followed, or the pivotal shift that turned it into a living lecture for the entire cabin, and soon the broader land at large, viewing the entire seat to be affair, not as a simple mix-up or an unfortunate ID flub, but as a manifestation of deeper systemic rot that serves as a mirror for the daily lived experiences of multitudes who encounter such barriers with scarce platforms or stages to defy them openly and effectively, where judgments fell upon him not for any deeds performed or words spoken, but purely for his visage and presence, for daring to occupy a niche that some deemed unfit based on superficial standards. Yet, unlike those who often isolate in the face of such moments without recourse, Marcus possessed an extra layer comprised not merely of means or privileged access, but of a lucid and articulate voice backed by his dad's expertise in flipping raw might into structured answerability and accountability, and in that critical instant of choosing refusal to flare up emotionally, opting instead for a lone, concise ping to alert, he effectively flipped the entire script of the encounter, transforming what was intended as a shaming tactic into an unintended boost for highlighting the inherent wrong. Because this particular round unfolded under watchful eyes that amplified its reach, ensuring that quiet complacency did not prevail as the delay inevitably spawned, and the yarn began to unwind with verity racing ahead of any potential bumps or turbulence along the way, leading those who had sat in stunned silence to deeply mull over their personal choices and roles, encouraging rule-following crew members to critically query the foundational frame of their operational systems and ingrained habits, and compelling the carrier that had previously brushed off countless lesser indignities or complaints to now heed and respond decisively, all because the voice they had initially ignored came backed by an unignorable force of influence and resources. But delving into the yarn's true core might, it resided not in Marcus's accumulated coin or his notable lineage, but in the unyielding grip he maintained on his personal honor, amid deliberate attempts to strip it away, reclaiming his designated spot, not through any vengeful spite, but with a purposeful and intentional resolve that spoke volumes, reminding every single witness aboard that genuine equity requires no blaring amp or microphone to resonate deeply. It merely demands a firm and unwavering foothold upon which to stand tall and unapologetic, and tracing the arc from that initial chill peak of suspicion at the boarding to the concluding sorry offered in humility, the episode evolved from what could have been a private and isolated beat into a fully communal audit that poses timeless and enduring queries for all to consider, such as how frequently we bear witness to clear wrongs unfolding right before us yet remain tongue-tied in response, or how often we craft excuses for our own hush in the hopeful assumption that another will step up and pipe the necessary words, with the overarching lesson transcending any single hue or category to center squarely on the power of sight and recognition, recalling emphatically that mere attendance in such moments counts for something substantial, while ensuring that honor and respect should always precede and overshadow any lurking bias or preconception, binding us in duty to spot and address when someone is shoved aft, whether in literal spaces or figurative ones, to find our voices and actively redirect the arc toward greater fairness and inclusion for everyone involved. And when it comes to applying this profound insight in everyday life, it all begins with tiny yet intentional starts, like peering deeper into situations before judging, consciously skipping over hasty presume based on appearances, and boldly engaging whenever unfairness is spied upon without the necessity of possessing great might or authority to make a meaningful dent, just the simple guts and courage to view things clearly and act accordingly. Letting Marcus's unfolding arc serve as a powerful cue and reminder that even the most entrenched hush is ultimately shatterable with persistence, that the softest forms of defy can thunder across vast spaces and minds when given the chance, and that true honor screams not for external regard or validation but endures steadfastly through trials, standing as a beacon of resilience. And if this particular arc has stirred your thoughts in new directions or prompted pondered moments of introspection or even halted you briefly in your tracks to reconsider perspectives, then consider extending support to the channel by subscribing today, ringing that notification bell to stay updated, and dropping a quick comment below sharing your viewing spot or key takeaways, as every like and share you contribute helps fuel such arcs to remain alive and vibrant, allowing them to count in meaningful ways as they ignite fresh ideas and cue deeper understandings of what humanity truly encompasses at its best. And we are genuinely grateful for your presence here with us. So stay ever alert to the world around you, remain compassionate in your dealings with others, and always recall that some flights have the power to alter paths far beyond their intended stops, enriching lives and societies in unexpected and lasting manners that continue to unfold long after the journey concludes.